Hey everyone, Eric Watson here, freelancer writer, player of games, writer of words, recorder of videos, and tabletop role-playing aficionado. Welcome to another DM's Guild review, my written and video review series where I take a look at the adventures and supplemental material at the Dungeon Masters Guild website. For this video, I'll be reviewing the DM's Guild adventure Petey's Pork Pie Emporium, designed by Remley Farr for Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. A review copy has been provided for the purposes of this review. If you enjoy my videos, consider using my affiliate links for your DM's Guild shopping and supporting me via patreon.com/roguewatson. Shout out to my platinum patrons, Andrew, Richard, Joe, Will, Tiny Dancer, Nick, and Rodney. And gold patrons, RPG Papercrafts, Charming Grenade, Pretty Boy and Yuma, Marcos de Vicente, Gilberto, Sean, a.k.a. Cert2B, Adam, Dead Lizard Lounge, and Sam. Thank you all very much for your support. PD's Pork Pie Emporium is a darkly satirical mega dungeon crawl adventure for levels 3 to 5, so firmly tier 1. The first thing you're going to notice is the art style, which is extremely different than most of what I see on the DM's Guild. I usually see like fantasy stock art or some really beautifully commissioned pieces, which are these grand, painted pictures that you would find like in a Wizards of the Coast book or something. I initially was very I don't know if put off is the right word, but just startled, I think would be the right term, by the art here, because I'm so used to dealing with the same art style for pretty much everything I've seen on the DM's Guild as supplement adventures and whatever else. Everybody kind of uses the same resources. I actually like this art quite a bit. It reminds me of I don't know, maybe like 90s Nickelodeon style or something, where it's kind of that designed to be gross look, like the Ren and Stimpy look or something like that. And it fits this adventure very well. If this were a traditional, fantasy dungeon crawl or adventure or something like that, then I think this art would be bizarre for that. But it's like a real world concept or location, which I really like in D&D. I wish more adventures took the concept. So in this one, it is a barbecue restaurant, and you are searching for a missing person that was last seen working here, and you have to delve into and go deeper and deeper as dungeon crawls go, and you realize it's just a demonic hellscape run by these cannibalistic hog demons called hogkins. And there's all kinds of messed up stuff going down here, and it's a big kind of dark satire on like corporate environment and chain restaurants and all this stuff. And it's very, very well done. It's very clever and interesting. A really cool dungeon design. And this artwork is featured throughout, and I think it's actually pretty effective at describing this kind of disgusting but funny hellscape that you end up putting yourself into. So I'm pretty positive on it. So I'm just trying to say, if you are turned off by this art style, if you think it's just too bizarre for the stuff you've been looking for in the DM's Guild, I would say, listen to this review, because I'm going to tell you it is a really, really cool adventure with a lot of neat ideas. It is designed as a zine. Is that how you pronounce it? It's supposed to be. I know I get the online magazine thing, and it's supposed to be pronounced zine. Every time I see it, I want to say zine though, because it's English language, E at the end, long form vowel. I think it's supposed to be zine. But anyway, it's a collection of that style, which are the printable, I think normally black and white, very small, kind of magazine style format that you would see a bunch of just smaller in focus things, content in it for a tabletop RPG. So in this case, this is just a single adventure, basically based around a single giant dungeon crawl. When I say giant, I mean fucking gigantic. It is over 20 pages and over 50 rooms, and it's just all one dungeon crawl. That is the entire adventure. It is. I mean, it's multiple sections as you go down, the restaurant on the surface level, and you go down into this messed up like processing area, and then all of a sudden you arrive at the corporate office on the 558th layer of the abyss, which is sort of all one dungeon if you want to think about it that way. It is absolutely gigantic and very well done, but it is basically just that dungeon crawl. So the entire organization and structure and everything is lacking compared to a lot of other adventures that I've reviewed, in that they have, multiple adventure hooks. They'll have the dramatis personae right at the beginning. They'll have an adventure overview where it tells you, okay, here's like Act 1, Act 2, Act 3. This one lacks all of that. Instead, it just has the single page right here that's the adventure prompt. And then it has a single page at the end that is the like concluding the adventure section. Otherwise, it is just all dungeon crawl. So that part is a bummer because I don't think you necessarily need multiple adventure hooks or anything like that. I mean, it's nice to have, but it definitely feels like I didn't get a whole lot of information to actually tell a story. I do think I've got enough information to run a really cool dungeon, but there is you get a mission at the beginning, which is to rescue this lord's daughter. And it's just the bullet points you can see right here that his wife passed away, and he had like an argument with his daughter about the fact that he got remarried really quickly, and then she left, and she is now taken up, or last seen or whatever, at Petey's Pork Pie Emporium, which is of course in any town you want to put it in, which is this swanky barbecue joint basically. And your mission is to go get her and bring her back, which is, fine. That's kind of sets up the heist like format of this dungeon, which is to say you're not kicking down doors and fighting enemies. You're actually going through the chocolate factory craziness of everything going on in here and just kind of experiencing it and doing a lot of maybe role playing and exploration versus straight up combat. In fact, if your party leans more towards the like murder hobo style of the spectrum of what your group wants to get, I don't know if you would as much enjoy this adventure as if you really want to get into the exploration and thinking outside the box and doing silly stuff with it. But maybe your murder hobo party would do that when presented with an adventure that is so absurd and crazy that they get caught up in it. So that's something to consider as well. But I did find the actual structure of the storytelling part a little bit lacking in the beginning and end. In fact, the end is literally just like, hey, here are the ways you can get out of this dungeon, and here are the like epilogue things that could happen afterwards. But it's acting like all of that takes place outside the scope of the adventure, when in fact that's like the climax and end of the adventure. So I don't think that should have just been hand waved away in a single page. But that being said, the middle part, which is the full-on dungeon crawl, is fucking fantastic. It's really great. As you can see, the map art actually differs. It's 3 different styles. We get this style, which is used for the first 2 levels, which is the restaurant, which is a really neat style. It's got the rooms laid out so you can see the physical structure, but then instead of having grids, it just has actual pictures and original art in there, which is really neat. Now, granted, I can't use this as an actual battle map, which is a bummer. Although it's not hard to come up with a restaurant battle map. But so in an ideal situation, I would, in addition to this, also get a kind of boring ass battle map to actually use on something like Roll20. But I think this is a really cool idea, and I like this a lot, and the art looks really cool. So the top level of the kitchen, there's nothing too nefarious going on. But of course, you can see stairs going down into the bottom where you see some meat hooks and the hogkin chief, I think, or is it just a regular hogkin? Okay. Named Jerry, who is wearing glasses and trousers. He pretends to be a hog, an actual hog, when players first go down there, which adds to the whole like silly absurdness of this whole adventure. You do not want to play this adventure with any kind of straight face. This should be just crazy, bonkers, bananas. This is the beer and pretzels game. Yes, there is some dark stuff going on here, but it's all done in the name of I think pretty decent satire in terms of, oh yeah, corporate overlords are demons and all that kind of thing, and business is hell and all that. So, and I'm down for all that. I think it's done really well. I'm actually going to read a sentence, and I don't usually quote adventures word for word, but this one is just really particularly good. This is whenever they leave. I guess they probably end up fighting him, but they don't have to. In fact, he can leave and just kind of throw a fireball in the room. There is not a whole lot of combat. If, again, your players could make it through basically this whole adventure without ever fighting anybody if they role play correctly. And the fact that even as deep as the corporate office, they get like visitors to go like open franchises, for example. So you can make it through this adventure with just playing smart, playing fun, talking with people, getting up into the craziness of it all instead of just hacking away at everybody. And I think that would actually be the worst outcome, is if the players just want to fight everything that they come across, which would actually lead to their death, because eventually they will come across a Baylor, who is the district manager who flies around this endless abyss between the like corporate office and the whatever this factory section is, and the players can meet up with him and actually make a deal with him, which is freaking awesome. So the sentence I'm going to read, which is during the transition of the restaurant portion into this kind of factory portion, which, yes, looks like giant living intestines. Like crap fumbling through the intestines, a mile's worth of traveling through this lightless organic pipe brings the party to Area 11, where the ceiling shits them out onto the dirty ground. That's amazing. And I love that the language used here is like I talk. It's not stuffy at all. It's not too like pompous. It is very much it's casual. It is it's cursing. Like it's a very fun read, and it fits with the theme of the adventure, which is the ridiculousness of everything. So just some examples: that marinade traps. There are truffles set up where if players don't eat the truffles, it sets off these scalding marinade traps, which is clever because obviously all the hog demons eat the truffles, so they don't have that problem. You can find little clues along the way because you're on a rescue mission. So it's kind of a heist format in that way, because you have a mission to go in somewhere and do something, in this case rescue a person, and you're not meant to fight everything. And those two things I think are big like checkboxes for a heist. Now, the reason I don't think I would categorize this as a heist necessarily is because you have no knowledge of the area you actually have to get into. There's no planning phase. There's none of that. Instead, in fact, that's a big part of the adventure is you just go into this restaurant, start asking questions, and you end up going deeper and deeper and just going, what the fuck is going on with this place? So it's a cool melding of some heist format and some just that kind of Alice in Wonderland, like you don't know where you are or what's going on other than things are weird and getting weirder. There's a checkpoint with Hogkins that pat you down and try to steal your stuff. There's a garbage chute you have to climb over. There's just vats of this steroid where you can actually find a jar labeled with the woman you're looking for, which is a clue of what door she took at some point. Giant meat hooks you can ride across this endless abyss. These maps, you probably can't see them too well on this screen, but they are provided as separate player handouts in a zip file. We get non-annotated maps and non-gridless maps, non-gridded maps, versions of all of these maps, which is great because as you can see, this one, and I believe this one here, so 3 of them. And I love the way this is done, by the way, broken up into sections instead of one full page, like, side cut thing that I have to keep referring to. Instead, it's every other page has a map on it, so I can instantly refer to that map on the page. That's actually a really great structure that I like a lot. These maps are battle maps. These can be used. Now, granted, it's that black and white. It's not colored, but it does have decent detail on there. The only thing that's a little confusing here is that this is meant to be a catwalk above this area, and there's no elevation indicators on this map that I can tell. Same thing with the pipe that goes up and over. Maybe it doesn't go up. So there's a little bit of confusion there, but otherwise I think it's a pretty solid grid map. But we don't get grid maps for all the section. Like I said, there's a restaurant area isn't obviously a grid map, and then eventually there's one map that's actually a side cut view, which is really interesting looking. Right here, just to skip ahead a little bit, which is a really neat one. It looks like like a 2D video game strategy guide that I had like in the 90s or something, that a side cut view, but obviously you can't use this as a battle map. So I love these map designs, but it is a bummer that we don't get the actual grid battle maps for each section, for each like leg of the journey. Just to go over a few more things, there's a really interesting path that players can take, 2 very different paths to get to the corporate office. One of them is they encounter this giant chained up sow that is being milked, and it has this mind-controlling addictive substance. So, of course, half the employees are just suckling at its disgusting teats here. This picture is fucking phenomenal. So characters can either try to avoid it or reason with it or try to run away from it because they don't want to fight a CR, whatever it is, 15 or 16. The stat blocks are provided at the end of the adventure. Instead, they can go down this tunnel into this crazy area where they have to hear all these poems and crawl down this like esophagus of the hog and then choose 4 different doors, which are these trial rooms that allow them to essentially relive their darkest desires or wants, which is a really tricky thing to present from a, published DMs Guild product, is like, hey, this works entirely based on what your PC's like backstories and motivations and all that is, instead of giving me actual like, here's what happens in this room. It's a very bold choice. I don't know if it would probably end up working for everybody. I think a good DM could make it really interesting in terms of like, it does give you a generic theme. So like the blood room, if you pick the blood room, that has to do with family. So you'd end up, the PC would see their perfect version of a family, which could either be their family from the past, or maybe like their current family and friend, like their friends or their family or whatever you want to use for that. And they're meant to either overcome the room or something. I don't even think there's a save here. It's just meant to be purely a role-playing situation, which is interesting and cool. But it is entirely up to the DM to actually set that up into a meaningful encounter. Basically, that's purely role playing. Or they can ride this milk pipe that you see here across this abyss, either walking on top of it or going through it. And through the mile-long abyss, they might find the Balor district manager, who they can work with. There's a whole page on how to use this Balor, which is fantastic. The fact that it is one of the smartest creatures in the monster manual, so he would not be fooled by the players, and he would try to work with them because he is being controlled by the evil corporate Emporium office that is here. They've got his true name. That's demons or devils are all about true names. And so you get like a side quest to basically go get his true name out of the foreman's office, and then he could be a really good ally for the finale. And that's partly one of the like hand-waved bullet points. Is like, oh yeah, if you helped this guy, by the way, he'll help you escape the whole dungeon. Like, well, okay, I wish that was like a paragraph instead of a sentence. But it's still good information here, and obviously this art is very cool and evocative. And if they go that pipe route, they'll find a gelatinous cube of curdled milk inside here. There's the actual foreman's office, a portal that takes you everywhere, which is meant to be an escape room and not necessarily going anywhere in the dungeon, but you could just go to the corporate office at that point. Look at this picture of the corporate office. That's so great. That's so great. Just a hellscape of buildings and windows everywhere. And so this is, after all of that, like all of that would be plenty of dungeon. And I was reading this for the first time and just thinking, okay, this is the finale in the end. Okay, this is the finale in the end. Then we got to the corporate office. I'm like, holy shit, this is a whole nother dungeon on top of all of that we just did through the restaurant, through the factory. I don't know how many sessions or how long this is supposed to be, but this is a long ass dungeon crawl for what I thought was going to be a pretty short, because again, it's that zine format. I thought it was going to be a lot shorter and simpler than this. And I'm glad that I was blown away by the size of this dungeon. The corporate office is not annotated via numbers, unlike the other sections of the adventure, which is weird. Instead, it's just the title of each room they have to find. So the waiting room, the freight shop, the foreman's office, and all that. Again, there's not really any information here in terms of like, are there patrols of things around? It's not meant to, I mean, it is an office. Like you can walk up to the front desk and ask questions, and you can go to the waiting room and you can snoop around in the storage place. It's very much that heist format at this point, especially once they get to the office. And there's not even much like security detail. So I think your players you're really meant to get with the fun of being in this absurd situation and trying to deal with it from a exploration and social standpoint, and maybe some skill checks versus actual combat in any of these areas. There's a cool twist at the end where you realize that because again, the father had remarried after his wife / the mother of the woman you're trying to find was killed. It turns out that she was murdered by the dad, and she traded her soul to this Emporium in order to save her daughter from a similar fate because she was worried about her. And then so the daughter got recruited by, or maybe she already worked at I don't know. It's I'm a little confused about that. If she already worked at this building and then she was taken to the corporate office, maybe. I don't know how that worked. But in any case, so the mom is there as a ghost that you have to find. And if she actually has a job here, her job is to possess the enemies of the Emporium, and then there's a Nothic nearby that will interrogate them. So she is straight up an employee, because if there's anything about the demonic corporate hellscape is that everybody's got a job. I get that a lot. There are no prisoners, just employees. So I like that twist a lot. That's pretty fun. So you want to try to escape with both of them if you can, although the ghost mom will try and sacrifice herself, but the goal should be to get her contract back from a separate room. Again, it's just a fun bit of exploration and role-playing versus actual combat and skill checks. But that being said, I do wish there was more than just this one page for concluding the adventure. I mean, escaping can be going back through the whole dungeon, can be going through a portal. All the Hogkins have the ability to just teleport anywhere if they explode a nearby Hogkin. Or or you can use that Baelor as an ally to escape. But these are just bullet points instead of actually like I wanted more here, basically information on how to properly run the climax of the story. You know, what happens if she runs out? Is there security detail? Is there any kind of boss fight at the end? There doesn't have to be, but and then afterwards, there's some interesting ideas here. But this is just like the designer like spitballing ideas. Like, you know, now that you know the truth, do you return to the Lord and confront him? Do you just turn her back in? How does the mom react? Does she reward you if you let the daughter escape? Is the person that the Lord married turns out to be a succubus? Maybe she was behind everything. Like, these are all good ideas, but I would have preferred that the designer just ran with one of these and then made that part of the story in the actual ending. That would have been more satisfying versus just giving me a whole bunch of ideas and just kind of collectively shrugging your shoulders and just saying, well, you figure it out. So a little disappointing here, although I do like the ideas that are presented here. I wanted a more concrete information, both at the beginning and the end of this adventure. Now, there are numerous areas throughout the adventure where you can use just kind of rando employees for whatever you want. And I was absolutely blown away. There are over 50 NPC employees listed here with name and then a description of them. And these are all freaking hilarious. I absolutely love this. So, for example, there's Piotr, a middle-aged male human, hunchback, mute, only speaks through an oven mitt puppet with fake eyes attached to it. That's pretty good. There's a young halfling named Trisha, wears her work uniform in public, lives with 14 cats, but she's allergic to cats. Belch, his pants fall down a lot. He has a spider named Jeb living in his shoe. It's meant to be just very silly and, you know, again, ridiculous. And not all of them are like Julia. Everyone has a great experience. Team builder, vegetarian. You know, it's all of these are just eccentric stereotypes of characters that you would find in such an absurd situation as employees. And I think that fits perfectly. And the fact that we get over 50 of these is freaking hysterical. One of them is just named Broom, who is a broom mimic that just eats table scraps. You got to include that character for sure. I absolutely love this. And the fact that we get over 50 of them is ridiculously awesome. Fantastic. And then finally, we get the list of stat blocks for the new Hogkins. And credit to this adventure for coming up with its own, essentially its own signature creature, and then using that creature with multiple stat blocks. We get the regular version, the chief, the crackling, the gastromancer, and of course that gigantic great sow. To where we hardly get any creatures from the actual monster manual, and that is really impressive. Especially for a tier 1 adventure without any kind of like signature boss fight necessarily. So very, very cool adventure. I'm very positive on it. It is a little bit frustrating from a story point of view in terms of what it's setting up and then how it's trying to end it. But man, that dungeon crawl is one of the most unique dungeons I've ever seen. All right, so pros and cons for Petey's Pork Pie Emporium Pro. It's a huge dungeon with multiple segments and really interesting and fun ideas. And I really just glossed over it, but just absolutely delightful with how dark and twisted things get. Pro, it has unique, evocative artwork and maps that fit the dark satirical theme. So I actually was pretty pro on the artwork. Originally, when I first saw it, I was not sure I would even like this art. But after realizing the what the adventure is and what the theme is, and the fact that the art is used so well, including the map styles are used so well to fit with the adventure theme, I absolutely love it. Pro, I love that list of over 50 funny NPC employees. That is delightful. It's a fun read, and it's a great use of a like table of rolling somebody and coming up with a random employee that your players might just talk to. Cons, the adventure structure lacks an adventure overview section, which is the part at the beginning that I feel like we don't need necessarily adventure hooks or anything, but I needed something that says, okay, here's what happens. Here's the general structure. They're going to go from here to here to here. And at the end, they're going to find this and that. Like, I need that couple paragraphs to give me an overarching, like, what is the story you're trying to tell here? Other than the fact that this isn't a ridiculous adventure. And you can include that in there. Like, the theme here is more about this kind of dark descent into this depraved, dungeon than maybe even telling the overall story. That's fine. And the other con is at the end, of course, that major plot details and story finales are hand-waved or brainstormed in a single page at the end. So my biggest complaints, the beginning is too brief and the end is too brief in terms of the information that I want. Final verdict. Petey's Pork Pie Emporium features a deliciously twisted mega dungeon that begins in a barbecue joint and ends with intestine tunnels and depraved corporate hog demons. Thank you to everyone for watching this video review. You can see my written review at roguewatson.com. You can support my work at patreon.com/roguewatson, and you can follow our own D&D adventures here on my YouTube channel. Thank you.